Hi angels, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate. If you're new here, I do spirituality and lifestyle content. This video is going to be my ultimate beginner's guide to spirituality. I am going to format it the same way that I did my ultimate beginner's guide to crystals video. If you haven't seen that video already, I'll link in the description. I'll also put a card up here. But there's a lot of information that I want to go over, so I've split the information up into sections. I feel like this video might be a little bit long, so I will put chapters on this video as well as timestamps in the description. First, we're going to talk about my personal beliefs and my spirituality. Then we're going to talk about everything that I think that you guys need to know about spirituality. I feel like this section is going to be like the bulk of this video, the meat of this video. The next section will be all about how to get into spirituality, how you could start your own spiritual journey. And then at the end, I'm going to do a Q&A with the questions that you guys left me on Instagram and in my last community post. If you want to participate in future Q&As, make sure to follow my Instagrams. I'll leave them both up here and in the description. So to quickly talk about my beliefs, I consider myself Buddhist. I also practice a little bit of modern day spirituality and general witchcraft. I grew up in a very traditional Buddhist Vietnamese household. I will link my entire spiritual journey video up here and in the description as well. So you can watch that video if you want to know more about my journey in depth. Because of the environment that I grew up in, I'm very comfortable saying that I practice Buddhism, and then when it comes to modern day spirituality and general witchcraft, I take what resonates and I leave the rest. So that's just a little background on me so you guys can see what perspective I'm coming from. Okay, now let's talk about all the things that I think you guys should know about spirituality. The first thing that I want to talk about is very, very important. I want to let you guys know that spirituality is going to look different for everyone. And that's because it's all based on your personal beliefs and your intuition. So a spiritual person is just someone who believes that there is more than just them, than just their physical human form. And that's why spirituality looks so different for everyone, because by definition it's very, very broad. There are people who consider themselves spiritual, but they also believe in the Christian God. There are people who don't believe in the Christian God. There are people who are spiritual and practice witchcraft. There are spiritualists who don't practice witchcraft. So when it comes to your own spiritual journey, make sure to dig deep, figure out what your beliefs are, follow your intuition, and just do what feels right. Earlier, I mentioned the term modern day spirituality, and what I mean by that is pretty much the spirituality that you see on the internet, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. Modern day spirituality has roots in Buddhism, Hinduism, Native American practices, African practices. It really kind of like picks and chooses from different cultures and different religions and combines all of them into what is known as modern day spirituality. But it's important to recognize where these practices come from. It's important to recognize the roots and pay respects and properly educate yourself on these practices. Some people prefer to practice modern day spirituality because it's kind of a little bit of everything. Other people prefer to specifically practice Buddhism, practice Hinduism. It's really up to you. When it comes to spirituality, the important thing to remember is that you are the powerful being, right? So all of the answers are within you. Make sure to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and just go to wherever path feels correct to you. A lot of people do have issues with modern day spirituality because they do find it to be appropriative. I understand where that's coming from, because a lot of times these spiritualists don't credit where these practices come from. They don't really pay respects or do proper education. So make sure if you're going towards the modern day spirituality route, you're very much educating yourself and you're understanding how to practice these practices while being respectful and not being offensive. Okay, and make sure you figure out what is closed and what is open. So that leads us to our next topic, closed practices. Closed practices are very much a real thing. If someone tells you that closed practices aren't real, I recommend that you run, because that person reeks of disrespect. So what are closed practices? Closed practices are practices, rituals, whatever, that can only be performed by certain people. Now this is for historical, cultural, societal, environmental reasons. For example, hoodoo is a closed practice. Hoodoo was created by formerly enslaved Black Americans, so the teachings and the practices within Hoodoo are very specific to that generational trauma. So taking that into context, taking that into account, anyone who is not Black really does not have any purpose practicing Hoodoo, because they do call onto their ancestors, they do rituals that are specific to their history and to their trauma. So as someone who is not Black, I have no business practicing that. It's okay to learn about closed practices. Like, for example, I researched Hoodoo not to practice it, but I researched it so I could properly understand why it's not for me. And that's something with closed practices that you guys need to do. When you're researching whether something is closed or open, research it because you want to learn why it's closed or open, not because you want to know, can I have this for myself or not? You need to switch that mentality. Another closed practice that is very much ignored and disrespected is smudging, or the use of white sage. Now, a lot of spiritualists will use white sage because they think that it smoke cleanses. That is not true. There's a misconception that white sage is used for smoke cleansing. White sage is used by Native American tribes, certain Native American tribes, to do a ritual called smudging. And smudging is the act of using white sage to raise the area's vibration to a certain level to invite in certain spirits, Native American spirits. So with that context, if you're not from a Native American tribe that smudges, you should not be using white sage because it will not smoke cleanse. Simply put. Now, when I talk about environmental reasons, I'm referring to things like white sage that is now being stolen off Native American reservations because there's such a high demand for it, and now these Native people do not have access to white sage, which is a very important ceremonial herb for them. So in addition to the fact that it doesn't smoke cleanse, that it's not for non-Native people, you have to keep in mind that now it's almost extinct on reservations. Something that I want you guys to know about a spiritual journey is that sometimes it's not the prettiest experience or the happiest experience. Speaking from my own personal experience, my initial spiritual awakening was actually very dark. I talked all about it in my spiritual journey video, but I found that for other people it's been the same. Throughout my awakening, I did learn a lot, both about myself and the universe, and I did grow a lot stronger mentally. I also did lose a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people who went through a spiritual awakening and had the same experience. And it's not necessarily because we thought that we were better than our friends now, we had all this knowledge and they didn't, so we can't be around them. It's nothing like that at all. It's just that usually when you go through a spiritual awakening, you come out the other end a completely different person, and you no longer resonate with the older version of yourself. And sometimes old friends kind of cling onto that older version of yourself, and it's hard for them to let go of this idea of you or this version of you that they thought they knew. So sometimes it's best to let people go rather than reverting to that old version of yourself when you're with them, because that in the end could be harmful for you. So sometimes it's better to just let people go. It's better for you, it's better for them. Another really important piece of information that I want to share with you guys is that all of the knowledge that you need to know, everything, all of these teachings, all of this folk stuff is inside of you. You are your own source. People talk about their highest self and getting messages from your higher self. Your higher self is your source, and that's why I'm telling you guys that all the knowledge is within you. Any messages, downloads that you get from meditation, from journaling, those are really important. Those are direct messages from your higher self, from spirit, from the universe, etc. That's why I want to let you guys know that things like crystals, divination, herbs, etc., etc., those are all tools. The real knowledge and the real magic is all within you. Sometimes I'll scroll on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, and I'll see someone say something along the lines of, I really want to start my spiritual journey, but I can't afford so-and-so, whatever. And it makes me really sad because they've been taught that you need all these things to start your spiritual journey, and that just kind of reeks of classism to me. you don't need anything to start your spiritual journey. You don't need to buy this or that. Like, you don't need any of those things. Those things are tools. They can help you, but they're not necessary. Hey, I somehow forgot to mention the difference between spirituality and witchcraft, which is something that I really wanted to talk about. I think it's because I have the memory of a walnut, but anyway, I want to make it very clear that spirituality and witchcraft are not related. Some things kind of overlap, some things coincide, but they are not related. You could be spiritual and not be a witch, and vice versa. You could be a witch and not be spiritual. Simply put, you are a witch if you practice witchcraft. So that includes spells, candle magic, glamour magic, etc., etc. The best way that I can explain it is that spirituality is all about learning and understanding that everything has energy, that we are more than just our physical form here on earth. And then witchcraft is the practice of obviously practicing magic and spells and taking the knowledge of energy and combining it with things that were given by the earth to create some kind of change. Witchcraft was formed and used usually by suppressed, oppressed, marginalized groups to kind of create change and maybe bring a little bit of justice that the system was not doing for them at that time. So some examples are groups of women, people who are pagan, people who practice hoodoo, etc., etc. Some people who are spiritual do practice witchcraft. They do spells, they do candle magic, any type of magic. And then there are witches who practice their craft, they're practitioners in their craft, but they don't do any spiritual things, like typical spiritual things such as meditation, manifestation, stuff like that. So that is the difference between the two. You are a witch if you practice witchcraft. That's it. You can research more if you'd like, but there is a difference between the two. They are not interchangeable, they are not the same. Sometimes they relate, but they are not the same. I think that's all that I have to say for that section. There's going to be a lot more information in the next section, as well as the Q&A, but I think for this section we're good. Let's talk about how you could start your own spiritual journey, how to get into spirituality. I would recommend reading. That's what I personally did. I feel like that's a good way to educate yourself and kind of gently introduce yourself into this new information. So some of my favorite books are Becoming Supernatural, The Four Agreements. I really like The Green Witch. I'm kind of blanking right now, but I will link all of them in the description so you can easily shop for those books. If you're not in a financial situation to purchase physical books, I would recommend going to the library. A lot of these books I actually found at my local library, so I would try there first. Other things that you could do to try to get yourself into spirituality, one of them would be meditation, the other one would be journaling. So when it comes to meditation, I would simply meditate for 10 to 15 minutes just to start off. At first it's actually pretty hard. I thought it was pretty hard because I thought the goal of meditation was to stop the thoughts in my head, but I'm neurodivergent, so those thoughts never really stop. I later learned that meditation is not about stopping the thoughts in your head at all. It's about recognizing them, observing them, and deciding whether you want to act on them or not. Now, because I've trained my brain through meditation, I could have like an intrusive thought or a really like negative thought. I kind of just see it and I'm like, all right, and then move on from it, rather than taking it personally, like, why do I think like this? Why am I this way? Letting it like really affect me, because now I know that my thoughts are not me. I am simply observing them. There are guided meditations on YouTube that you guys can look up and follow along with if you're having a hard time with meditation. When I first started out, that's what I did because I had a really hard time with focusing and just being present. But those guided meditations were very helpful. And then for journaling, I kind of treat my journal as my diary. So I will tell it what I did that day, tell it how I felt that day. I'll also talk about everything that I'm grateful for. I'll do my written manifestations in my journal as well. Another thing that I like to do in my journal is just self-reflection. So I'll read over how I felt that day and kind of figure out why I felt that way. Was it valid? Was it not valid? When I'm having a really bad day, that's when I'll make it a point to do the self-reflection, because the self-reflection has really taught me how to not take things so personally and kind of understand that other people's reactions and their actions towards me aren't always a reflection of me. It's more of a reflection of them and what they're going through. So self-reflection has helped me in that way. It's kind of like a light version of shadow work. I also do shadow work in my journal. I have a whole video about shadow work coming soon. But I don't necessarily recommend shadow work for someone who's an absolute beginner, just because it could be a little bit overwhelming. You really have to dive deep and surface up like the ugly parts of yourself. So if you're not super stable, if you're just dipping your toes into spirituality, maybe shadow work isn't the right thing for you at that time. But I do think that it's beneficial for anyone really at some point in their life. So those are some of the things that personally helped me get into spirituality. But I do want to take this opportunity to talk about divine timing. Divine timing is the concept that things will happen for you or to you at the right time. If you're trying really hard to get into spirituality and it's not clicking, it doesn't seem like it's working for you, it might just not be the right time for you. Because you could really try as hard as you want, really force yourself into it, but if it's not the right time, it's just not going to happen. So just trust the universe and trust that your time is coming. Everything happens for you at the right time. Okay, let's get into this Q&A. You guys left me a lot of good questions on my Instagram and my community post. I will leave both of my Instagrams here. Someone asked how to deeply connect with spirit guides. So whether you know it or you feel it or not, you do have a connection with your spirit guide. They are always there for you regardless of whether you're actively communicating with them or not. For me, the way that bonded me and my spirit guides was honestly meditation. I meditated with crystals like angelite, and that really helped to open me up to the angelic and spirit realm. I know that there are guided meditations specifically for that as well. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of guided meditations. A lot of you guys ask questions about meditation, specifically what I like to do, what are some meditation tips. So I talked a little bit about meditation earlier, but for me, I meditate around 15 to 20 minutes. I originally started meditating around 10 to 15 minutes. Like I said before, I use those guided meditations on YouTube. Those were very, very helpful. At one point, I did use the Calm app as well. That was okay. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I only used it a couple of times. And then in regards to whether you're meditating correctly or not, there is no wrong way to meditate. So what I do is considered like traditional meditation, where you sit down, you focus, and you try to observe your thoughts and just be present. And doing that a couple times a week over the course of months will help kind of train your brain into a different way of thinking, and that's what meditation is all about: being present, observing your thoughts, understanding that you are not your thoughts, you are separate from your thoughts. So when it comes to meditation, be patient, be consistent, do whatever feels right to you. There's no wrong or right way. I'm sorry for the lighting, my camera died and it's been an hour and the sun has gone down, but I really want to get this Q&A done. Next question is how to do shadow work. I have a whole video about shadow work going up soon. It's going to be me doing shadow work for 30 days, and I go really in depth about how I do shadow work in that video. But basically I just do it through journaling. I find prompts from people either online or from my friends or in my own head or from my therapy, and I answer them in my journal, and that's how I do my shadow work. Someone asked, how do I know what I'm doing is actually working for me? The best answer that I can give you is to trust your intuition. If what you're doing, it feels right, just stay consistent with it. Do it for a couple of months and see if you're getting results. If you're feeling better, if you're attracting what you desire, if you are manifesting well, then obviously what you're doing is working, but really just trust your intuition. Favorite tarot and oracle decks. These are the only decks that I have, so by default, these are my favorites. I have this one's a tarot deck, and then this is my oracle deck. And I haven't felt the need to buy any other decks, so they work for me. Is it okay to buy your own decks, or do you have to have them gifted? You could buy your own decks. In some cultures it's customary, but it's not required, so I bought these myself. I prefer to buy decks myself because I know myself best. I know what I'm looking for, I know what I like. What does each angel number mean and what should I do about it? When you search up angel numbers and it'll give you certain specific meanings for 222, 333, 444, etc., etc. I don't necessarily believe in those. I take angel numbers as a warning or a sign, or just like my angels trying to get my attention. Because in my personal experience, when I saw angel numbers, it was when I was thinking about like how much I hated my old job. And at first I'd be like, okay, I'm seeing 222, change is coming, so let's stick out this job and maybe the environment will change. Wrong. My angels are trying to get me to acknowledge the thought that I was having and do something about it. So for me, angel numbers are a way of my guides trying to get my attention, not necessarily sending a specific message. But when it comes to numerology, like 333, you add that up, that equals 9. If you look up the numerology meaning for 9, it will give you a more descriptive and a little bit more accurate meaning than just looking up meaning of 333. I hope that helps. How do you incorporate sustainability and spirituality together if you do? So when it comes to spell jars, like in my craft, I actually use reusable containers. I don't buy those little spell jars that you can get on Amazon or Michael's because it's hard for me to get stuff in there. It's so small. I actually use like big jars, like old pasta jars, old pickle jars, caper jars, stuff like that, and that's really good. I also save things like my ashes to add to salt to make my own black salt, but I think that's like pretty common practice. Some of the herbs I use I grow myself, so like rosemary, thyme, garden sage, stuff like that. I'm so sorry for this angle. My camera keeps dying and the charger doesn't reach super high on the tripod, so now I'm on the floor answering these questions. Do you use any Vietnamese traditions in your spiritual practice? Of course I do. Growing up in the household that I grew up in, it's very normal for us to incorporate our culture. So I do Dam Yo with my grandma, which is like celebrating your ancestors' death anniversary. You do like food offerings, spiritual offerings, beverage offerings. So basically a celebration of your ancestors. And then I also Dok Nhang, which is lighting a very special incense for your ancestors. So most of the spiritual work that I do surrounding Vietnamese culture is ancestral, which is why I have such a strong bond with my ancestors. What types of sage are acceptable to use and how? Basically any type of sage other than white sage. So blue sage, kitchen sage, I don't know, any other type of sage. Just white sage is not okay to use. What are spiritual things that you could do every day? So meditation is one of those things that I would recommend you do every day because it really helps to change your mindset. And then once you kind of like rewire your brain, or you like train your brain, you notice that little things you do throughout the day, they affect you differently, like the way that people speak to you, the way that whenever something happens to you, you take it differently than you did before. So it's like a mental practice that you do every day. You could also journal every day. Something else that I like to do every day is cleansing my aura with selenite or sand spar before bed. I really like to do that. The main one is just like trying to relearn the way that you think through meditation. What is a spiritual ritual you can't live without? Other than journaling, I would definitely have to say cleansing myself. I love cleansing myself. I don't know, I feel so good after. And then doing protections. Those two things are like my favorites. How to start with tarot. So personally, tarot is really hard for me, which is why I got an oracle deck. I'm neurodivergent, so memorizing all of the meanings of the cards and like just remembering what they all look like and everything like that is very, very hard for me. I still use the little book that comes with the deck. I use it every single time that I do a pull because my brain cannot manage to remember all of those cards. So honestly, my tips for learning tarot for beginners, I would say don't be afraid to use the little book that comes with it. You could write down the meanings of the cards if you like in a journal. I heard that that helps some people, but honestly I just use the book. Veiling, I'm not sure what the question is. Someone just wrote veiling. I do veil when I'm going somewhere really crowded or there's going to be a lot of energies there. I just don't want to pick up on anyone's energy and I don't want anyone to leech onto mine. So veiling is just you take a veil, you cleanse it, you put your intentions into it, and you cover the top of your head. That could be like a scarf, like a piece of silk, whatever, and it's called veiling. Okay, somebody asked me to talk about Wicca. Wicca is kind of like modern day spirituality in the sense that it takes bits and pieces from cultures and practices that came before it, It's definitely not the only way. It's not the only, you know, path of witchcraft that you could follow. A lot of people seem to think that it's the only way, but it's not. Definitely be respectful and pay respects to the practices that came before if you do follow Wicca. I don't necessarily label myself as any type of witch. That's why I always keep saying general witchcraft, because I don't want to label myself, and I don't think you need to label yourself either. Connecting with your spirit guides or having a deep connection with them. When you guys say spirit guides, what comes to mind for me is ancestors, because that is what I do. Like, that's who I connect with the most. And when it comes to ancestral work, doing your research on your own ancestors is very important. Like, you need to figure out what they like to eat when they were alive, what they like to drink, what they like to do, if they smoked, because then you can leave stuff like tobacco or cigarettes as offerings, and then they'll know like you actually went and did your research on them and asked and like sought out their favorite stuff, and that creates a really good bond. Somebody asked me what I do for each moon phase, so I actually have an app. It's called Moon Phase, and it helps me track like what moon phase we're in. So on the new moon, it's always about new beginnings for me. I write down my manifestations, what I want to accomplish this month, just like all my goals. And then the waxing crescent is the next phase, and this comes right after the new moon, and this is when I really start to like get things in motion, start working towards my monthly goals. And this is the time when I feel the most motivated and energized as well, so it's like a really good time to start getting things going. And then in my opinion, the phase that comes after the waxing crescent is pretty much the same. It's called the first quarter, but I feel the same, so I don't really acknowledge it that much, to be honest. And then during the waxing gibbous is when my dreams get really intense. This phase, TMI, usually happens like right before my period, like a week before my period, so my emotions are really heightened. So I try to like lay low and honestly just take it easy and just let the work that I put in earlier kind of like keep rolling. Like the ball is already rolling, you know, so things are now in action. I just kind of let those manifest, kind of let those simmer on their own. And then the full moon is when I start celebrating, because this is when I feel the most connection to my ancestors, the spirit realm. The veil is very much thinned at this time, so I feel really good. This is when I make moon water. I celebrate the earth by going out in nature, kind of harnessing my own power. I'll do different spells like celebratory full moon spells. So yeah, that's like a brief overview of what I do during each moon phase. Let me know if you guys want like a full in-depth kind of video. I am so sorry for the ending of this video. It was a little bit chaotic, but I appreciate you all for watching through the entire thing and sticking with me. I'll definitely do more Q&As in the future to answer the rest of your questions. As always, I appreciate your support. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!